Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lean Leadership. It's great to be back after a 6-month hiatus of webinars, and it's traveling around and working on a book and keeping busy in other ways. So welcome to those of you who are regulars, and welcome back to those of you who are regulars, and welcome to those of you who are new. We have people from 32 countries, the last time I counted, on the webinar right now, and that's just wonderful. The other thing that's wonderful to note is that Lean just keeps on spreading and spreading. We've got people from transportation, energy, retail, telecom, government, manufacturing, tech, financial services and banking, hospitals, insurance, pharma, defense, and advertising and marketing. So it's quite a diverse group, and welcome to all of you. Let's go ahead and, without further ado, get started. So in today's agenda, what we're going to be talking about are some components of lean management. This is the foundational webinar, and it's the first of 3 webinars that will talk about lean leadership. And I'd like to share with the group what my current thinking is on what all the various components are of lean management and how lean leadership fits into that. And then we're also going to talk about the foundational core values, mindsets, and practices that leaders need to adopt, and then what you can do or what you can help your leaders do to adopt the lean leadership mindsets and practices. Of the people that are on the webinar live today, about half of you are in leadership positions and have staffs and responsibilities for performance directly, and then about half of you are either in consulting or internal improvement full-time roles. And so I'm going to be speaking to both groups throughout the webinar. And then for today's webinar, what we're going to specifically talk about are some of the core values that underlie lean management that sometimes get forgotten, that without those core values in place, you're not likely to get much traction with lean in any way, and certainly lean leaders won't be modeling the behaviors that they would like to see in the organization or needed in order to become a lean organization. We'll talk about key performance indicators, visual management, and work standardization, as well as go and see leadership, or Gemba leadership, going to where the work is done. And then the final thing we'll talk about is the one don't that destroys all lean efforts and is really surprisingly prevalent in all the clients, or not all the clients, but many of the clients we work with. So my name is Karen Martin, and I'm a lean practitioner, consultant, coach, whatever you want to call me. Also the author of 4 books and a 5th one coming out in the spring that have various elements of lean management in them. And the one in the spring is called Clarity First, and it's just focusing on the business and in the individual value of operating with greater clarity. So welcome to all of you. Now, those of you who have read John C. Maxwell are very familiar with his work. And what you probably remember from reading Maxwell's work is that he really places the leader in the core of a business and basically says everything rises and falls on leadership. And when I first was introduced to lean back in 2000 and started using lean exclusively outside of what I had been doing with total quality management, when I started using lean exclusively in hundreds now of client settings, I really began to believe in the beginning that you could have a grassroots development of a lean organization, and you can also have it grow from the middle. And what I've now learned 16 years later is that that's unlikely to be successful. It is possible, and there have been some organizations that have really become mature and broad spectrum lean organizations, but I am finding more and more that it really does start with the people at the top, and everything really does rise and fall on how those people are acting, behaving, the messaging that they're putting across an organization. So if you're in the middle of an organization or you're a full-time improvement professional and you don't have the uppermost leadership support for what you're doing, that doesn't mean that you can't achieve a heck of a lot. It does probably mean, though, that you're never going to have an organization that is consistently operating across the entire organization in a manner that's consistent with lean management. And so you'll have pockets of excellence and pockets of good performance, but probably not the large-scale organization-wide performance that could be achieved with the topmost person engaged. So again, this isn't to say you should throw in the towel and hang up your hat if your senior leader isn't on board and really behind lean management or any kind of improvement effort. But it does mean that you might want to change some of your approach and possibly scale back your expectations just a tad on what you can achieve and how fast you can achieve it. So then the other question comes with, well, if we need to develop leaders with very strong mindsets and behaviors that lead leadership, then how do we do that? Are leaders born? Do they come out of the womb with strong leadership skills, or is it a nurture type of thing? Can leaders be developed? And I'm increasingly finding very, very good results that they absolutely can be developed if they want to be developed. So continuous learning and challenging one's mindsets and experimentation and practice are all the ways that leaders become better and better and better. Reading, having a coach, getting feedback, asking for feedback, all of those things are what make leaders able to excel more and more in their role. If you're an internal person and you're trying to work with leadership teams and get them thinking lean and performing in a lean manner, it really does start with a conversation about what is that? What does that look like? And how do we do that? So you have to get very clear on what your ask is, your ask for your leadership team, and then start showing them, a different way of behaving and let them experience the benefit of behaving that way. And that is the quickest way to get it to become the new way of behaving in an organization. Now, when you look across lean, it's been interesting even in the past 6 months and traveling the globe so much, it's been fascinating to me to see how many people are thinking of lean pretty narrowly and very superficially. And there's so much to lean management that a lot of people have read one book, and it's one book that focuses on one element of lean, or they began back in the early 2000s when lean was just really starting to be spread across different industries. And back then, everybody was talking only about the tools, not about any of the management supporting infrastructure that's necessary for the tools to do their job. So I like to break it down into 4 chunks of the kind of development or the kind of elements of lean that you have to do in order to become a high-functioning lean organization. And that's that first and foremost, you've got to develop lean thinkers, and that's every single person in the organization, from the absolute top to the absolute bottom if you're in a hierarchical organization, and as broadly across the organization as exists. Lean management practices is a whole series of practices that you're going to be learning a little bit about today, and some of you are already pretty seasoned in this area, but you have to actually manage the business in new and different ways. And lean processes is what we focused on for a long, long time in lean, almost in exclusion of the other areas. And lean processes is, a little more of the kind of technical, mechanical part of what makes lean successful. It's no less relevant and no less important, but it is only one element of what lean is really about. And then the final thing, lean leadership needs to, of course, be lean thinkers themselves, and they need to understand the fundamentals of lean processes. They need to be also practicing in a lean way, but they have an added responsibility of being the responsible party of true north, and the party that is consistently communicating that and sharing the vision and making sure everyone in the organization stays aligned and focuses on what matters, and all of those things that are a leadership responsibility. So these 4 key areas, if you take a look at them, drill down to, or don't drill down, they actually become a bit of a jigsaw puzzle and not a linear jigsaw puzzle. When you think about what makes operational excellence and organizational excellence, top performing businesses, there's just so much that makes an organization able to achieve those high levels. And each piece in the lean, if you think about the lean bucket of principles, practices, and tools, each element butts up to and connects with another element of lean. So they can't be taken in a silo. They can't be taken all by themselves and expect to do much. They really do require this interconnection between all of the other elements. I'm getting a couple of comments that the audio is going in and out. That's probably a bit of the web connection on your end. And I do see that there's people from other countries that are saying that they're having audio problems. So I'm sorry about that. You might want to log out and log back in. Sometimes when we work with countries outside of the U.S., that seems to work. So you might want to try that. All right, so then when you take a look at this puzzle piece, again, nothing is linear. Lean management is really a very broad set of principles, practices, and tools that are a bit like this puzzle that we're putting together. Now, please don't get freaked out when you see this eye chart. This is about 5 years in the making of us working with clients and thinking about all the different components and seeing a lot of people that were not grasping the full realm of what makes lean lean. And so we took the actual technical work that we do and the kinds of conversations we have and broke them into 3 different categories in a triangle. So one is the practices themselves, one is the process design part of it, the technical part of it, and then at the core of all that are the core values and principles and philosophy that make lean so wickedly effective and have not been some of the predominant philosophies in previous improvement approaches. So what this webinar is going to do is the first of 3. I'm handpicking some of the management practices and core values to focus in on those. There's no way you can get through more than a few in a 1-hour webinar. And just to also set the stage for the webinar, you do have a question panel, and you can ask questions throughout the webinar if you'd like, but I probably will wait until the very end to answer them. There were also 2 great questions that people posed when they registered that I'd like to talk about too at the end. So I'll try to wrap by noon and then have 15 minutes to talk through some of those questions. Some of the best learning comes from questions. So let's take a look at the kinds of development you'll need to do. And if you take your whole workforce and divide them into 4 categories, and this is assuming that you've got some internal full-time improvement professionals. You may or may not, but this is assuming you do. So you've got the executive bucket and then the kind of middle manager rank, the front lines, and then the internal lean team. And there's more than these 4 categories, but if you boil them down to 4 basic categories, that's what it comes up to. And so for the executives, they really do need to know a little of everything, but what they really need to focus on are the mindsets, the core values that are needed and model that, Gemba-based leadership, which I'll cover today, PDSA problem solving, which is going to be covered in the next webinar, which I just scheduled this morning for Thursday, September 22nd, and I'll give you the link to register for that at the end. Strategy deployment, also covered in that next webinar, and KPIs, key performance indicators, which are being covered today. Middle managers need all of that, and they also need very, very strong process management capabilities and high levels of proficiency. The front lines need to focus primarily their lean work or their improvement work in the waste identification and elimination area, and also daily Kaizen, which is related to waste identification. And then the internal lean team has, of course, the biggest load of everybody because they have to pretty much know all of the above, and they also need to be pretty advanced with the analytical and countermeasures, analytical tools and countermeasures, and they also have to have on top of that a certain type of disposition, a certain level of knowledge around how business operates, and some savviness around human psychology and what it takes for effective change and those types of things, in addition to all of that technical expertise and the ability to practice lean behaviors. So the heaviest lifting actually does come from the internal lean team, even though you need the greatest support from the top. So let's take the first 3, which are very related: humility, respect, and curiosity. So one of the things that we've learned over the last probably 8 years in working and studying Toyota, and all the books and researchers that have been out there studying Toyota, which is the kind of roots of lean, is that there was a whole lot more to the way they think and behave that has to do with humility, respect, and curiosity than anyone imagined in the beginning. So one thing that we see a lot is leaders bringing into the improvement realm and in how they lead with a little too much ego, sometimes a lot too much ego. But, when you think about who makes it into the leadership ranks, this isn't all that unusual. You see these very high-performing people make their way into leadership ranks, and when you're high-performing, you really are, very effective and typically are able to think quickly and make decent decisions and those kinds of things, which are the very traits that get you into leadership role. However, once you're there, and this is mainly for those CEOs, CFOs, CIOs, and senior VPs that are on the webinar today, once you're there, you really have to check a lot of that at the door, which is often very difficult, especially if you don't have someone explicitly working with you to do that. And so we need to move into a realm of not knowing and being comfortable with not knowing and helping everybody else be comfortable with not knowing and starting to demonstrate robust problem solving and not thinking you know the answer and not thinking you know the root cause and not assuming data exists when it doesn't, or not assuming the data is telling you something when you haven't even gathered it, and on and on and on. So it's really important to make sure that everything is coming from a place of fact, and it's fact-based decision making. It's really important to make sure that you're helping people recognize that they're operating from assumptions and catching yourselves operating with assumptions or innuendo or half-truths, and making sure that you are in every step of the way using facts in order to make decisions and decide priorities and all those kinds of things. So this is, again, one of those human behavior elements that makes lean successful, is having everyone in the organization get sensitized to the fact-based decision making and fact-based prioritization and fact-based analysis, and basically developing a bit of an intolerance internally for anything but fact-based conversations. And you can do that very subtly by asking people, why do you think that? And well, what led you to that conclusion? And you can start sensitizing people to and starting to train their minds to be far more specific in using facts. The other thing that we see a lot is when people, they embrace the question why. That's no problem. Everyone understands the power of why. But there's a way you ask why that can make or break the whole improvement cycle. And so what we hear a lot is why being asked in an accusatory and blaming way versus why out of curiosity. So right along with humility is that curious, almost childlike interest in learning and not assuming you know it and asking why incessantly. We now finally, as adults, can be that incessant 2-year-old asking why, mommy, why, daddy? And it's okay if we ask it in the right spirit. And so why becomes your powerful friend, along with why not, and what if. Those are the corollary questions. But being able to, as a leader, ask that question why, and if you're internal, helping your leaders get sensitized to asking the question why is a great way forward for an organization. Now, along with why, I mentioned it comes, tone matters. So people can sense the spirit in which why is being asked intuitively. And so if leaders are not asking why from a place of curiosity and I just really want to understand, which sometimes helps to actually frame the question with that. I'm asking this question because I really want to understand why blah, 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 and finish the question. It helps set the stage for the listener to respond to you in a way that is not out of fear. What I have to say is that, organization after organization, hundreds of them now, thousands of people we've worked with, maybe tens of thousands actually by now, organizational fear is far more deep and far more widespread than most leaders will admit, and most leaders understand. And it comes in all kinds of shapes and forms, and it really, the main problem with fear is that people won't tell the truth. And I don't mean that they lie, but they'll withhold, they'll, couch, they'll, maybe not answer directly, and leaders won't have the information they need to make good decisions. And so, Deming, W. Edwards Deming's book, this wonderful book, Out of the Crisis, number 8 of the 14 points, management points, is you have to drive fear out of the organization. So if you think that you have no fear, I would challenge you to start having some good heart-to-heart conversations with people and ask the degree to which people feel comfortable telling leaders that there's a problem. And, you have to create a safe environment for people to want to tell you that there's a problem in order to get to the next step, which is actually solving the problem. So organization-wide fear is really prevalent, and it's one of the first things that you've got to do if you want to make much traction at all is you have to eliminate that fear, and that only happens with leaders involved. That does not happen with an internal improvement team saying, oh, trust us, don't fear. It has to be supported by leaders, declaring a ban on fear and then following through. The minute a leader says there's no fear here, please, we want to know, and then someone reveals the truth and that leader responds in a negative way, game over. You've just gone back to square one, and you probably have gone back to square minus one. So it's a very, very important thing to pay very close attention to. And, just start paying attention to conversations. You can smell fear. You can hear it, you can smell it, you can taste it. So just open your eyes, your ears, and your gut, and your heart space, and you'll start feeling the fear. So here's the other thing that's very important for everyone in the organization to embrace. As close to the beginning of your journey as possible, and even if you're 10 years into it and you're not as far as you'd like to be, it's time to go back to the fundamentals. People are not an organization's problem. Now, let me explain. You could have a hiring process that is maybe not quite as locked up as you'd like, and you may have a few people get through your sieve as you're recruiting and interviewing and all that aren't well suited for your organization. But those should be few and far between if you've got a robust hiring process. So yeah, you might hire the rare sociopath, and yes, that sociopath might be indeed a problem that you need to get rid of. But by and large, people come into work in the morning wanting to do a good job, wanting to serve, wanting to help your customers, and they are not the problem. And yet, every time there's a problem, the first thing you hear is a name associated with it. The problem is 99.999% of the time that the work systems and processes are not quite what they need to be, and they allow the problem to occur. They don't allow people to shine. That's the problem. And the good news is you can't change people, so that would be a horrible place to be where you have people that you feel like you need to change and you can't change them. You can change work systems and processes. It's a very liberating perspective to finally embrace that people are hardly ever the problem, that work systems and processes are. Now, what that means is we have to get an army of people in an organization who are extremely sophisticated and savvy with process management and measurement and ownership. You have to have an army of people that are minding the store and know how to detect systems and process problems, and they can do something about it. So what I like to suggest to you all is that it is long overdue to shift the manager's role, especially the middle manager's role, from being one that tries to manage people. You can't manage people. You can lead people. You can't manage people, to managing processes and building up their proficiency as quickly as possible on what that means. How do you truly manage processes and work systems? KPIs, key performance indicators, standard work, process ownership, it goes on, but there's a lot that has to be done. Fear will get driven out of your organization very, very quickly if you adopt this belief that the problem is not the people, it's work systems and processes. And I'd like to share one last story. There was a vice president of a financial services firm I was working with who started going to the Gemba, which we'll get to in just a moment here. And as she started visiting these different departments that she was overseeing, she started seeing the degree of dysfunction in the processes and work systems that these people were being expected to work within, and the little authority they had to do anything about a broken process or work system. This is back when they were first starting the lean journey. And, she called me one day and just sounded awful and was genuinely almost, she wasn't in tears, but she was very emotional about the degree to which she realized the type of work systems and processes they'd expected people to be able to shine within. And Toyota has been very quick to say that their processes are so superior that they can take people with average levels of proficiency and they can be superstars because their processes are that well defined and managed and all of that. They don't have to go out there and find an absolute 100% workforce full of superstars. I mean, it's just not realistic to get a full workforce of nothing but superstars. So, if you're not already just, having a rabid interest in getting your processes designed, documented, measured, managed, real management, not fake process management, real process management with constant attention paid to the processes, you're just going to have a much slower road. So it's enough of my soapboxing. But this is a big, big, big problem that we need to pay better attention to. Now, another leadership mindset, and this is another one that comes along with humility and respect. Respect comes in many forms. One form of respect is having processes and work systems that allow people to shine. It's not just how we talk to people. It's not just how we talk, or if we do or don't talk behind someone's back. It's far, far deeper than that, but far easier to fix than that. And that's just a matter of admitting and finally, grasping that people who do the work are indeed the experts. Leadership is the expert in setting vision, setting strategy. The people who do the work are the experts in the tactical day-to-day, step-by-step process by which they do work. And so no leader should ever be going in and telling someone what to do and how to do it. No way. It should be people doing the work that are determining how after leaders have set the what, set the direction. So, and then that's when workforces come alive and people are, excited to walk in the door in the morning. And when they leave, they're fulfilled at the end of the day. And that's what work should be. That's what work can be. It doesn't have to be as hard as we're making it. We have the ability to change this. Next, visual management. So visual management is talked about a lot, but I've got to tell you, of all the different lean components, it's the one that we see least applied across any organization. And I mean the physical evidence of it being applied. So let's talk about visual management a bit. I believe that there are 4 different parts or 4 different reasons to have visual management. One is to allow people to know what they should be doing, when they should be doing it, how they should be doing it, and that comes in the form of visual job aids and standard work and that type of thing. One is to communicate status. How many are coming in? How many are going out? How fast are we working? Then performance, which is related to status, is more about what should we be doing performance-wise and where are we actually at. And so you're able to measure yourselves against a known target, and that's where we come up with the gap. When you're solving problems, it's often a gap between where you are and where you'd like or need to be, so performance. And then finally, visual management is also a very, very good tool for communicating abnormalities. You need to know what's not normal and what is normal so that you can take action. So it's the ability to make problems visible. Making problems visible in the knowledge work environment. So I'm talking about office, service, government, engineering, retail, any of even healthcare to some degree has a pretty non-visual element to the work. But you can even make those problems become more easily caught and visible so they're not passed on, even with data and information that's being stored electronically. So here's a couple of rules of thumb to think about. And if you don't have these in place, then I would just caution you to not call yourselves a lean organization if you are. So in a lean organization, visual management reigns supreme, and there's no guessing about performance. So let's just see how you feel your organization is doing in terms of performance. When you go to any sporting event, isn't it interesting that there's a real-time scoreboard that everyone's focused on that communicates to the coaches, the team, and the audience exactly what's going on? We know how much time is left. We know who's winning. We know, sometimes what the penalty areas are. We know, in this case, who has possession. Home team has possession. There's a lot of information. It's simple. It's a lot of information, but very little data being displayed. So that's very, very helpful. Most businesses, most leaders do not know their true score, do not. So at the executive ranks, most executives know financially how the organization's doing, and that's about it. You know, they may know one element of operations. They may know a little bit about customer satisfaction, but we interview a lot of executive teams, and I've got to tell you that most of them really are in the dark about what's going on a day-to-day basis that is leading them to have the financials that they have. And so we're not asking executives to get into the weeds, au contraire, but there need to be levels of KPIs, key performance indicators, that are balanced and that show the full range of truth within the organization, not just financials. So if you think about it this way, I use the term corporate. If you're a government agency, just think about your corporate being the top agency under which you operate. Then there's a value stream, which is, a whole series of actions that you take on in order to go through actually delivering on a customer request, delivering value. And also there's usually a little non-value adding in there as well. And then there's at a functional or a departmental level, there need to be 3 different levels of KPIs that people are focused on. And every step along the way, everyone in the organization should be able to answer the question, how are we doing? Not just financially, operationally, how are we doing with anything that's relevant to the organization? So it could be that, there's been a very significant safety problem. There could be a very significant compliance problem. There could be a very significant morale problem. Wherever the problems are, that's the KPIs that need to be focused on. And, we like to mention 2 to 5 KPIs on a dashboard that give a quick glance of performance. And then you can have drill down KPIs that tell the details behind the dashboard KPIs. So here's an example of a corporate board. So we're going to look at all 3 levels. And you notice that in this corporate board, there are financials. So there's revenue per week. There's inventory turns, which can be converted to financials. Days of sales outstanding, financial. Sales per employee, financial. EBITDA, financial. But there's also safety, quality, and service. And guess what? They're on the top of the dashboard. So these dashboards, this happens to be a flat screen TV. This happens to be, I'm not sure it still is because I haven't been there for a while, but it was posted in the lobby where every single visitor came in and could see it. It was at the top of every stairs, and it was in a couple of the break rooms. And this was a privately held company. I kid you not. At this time, this was a privately held company, and they had all of this plain as day, transparent for everybody to see so that everyone knew the score. Very, very effective use of visuals and very indicative of lean thinking. Now here's a value stream area that has, you can see the board on the right here with the different KPIs, and this is where the teams gather to do daily management, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And so at the value stream level, most of you work in organizations where you have many, many value streams. And, even in a global organization, if you've got 80 offices around the globe, you still can have physical stand-up areas that you conduct daily management or weekly management, or in the case of executives, we recommend monthly management, where you're physically going to areas to look at what the results are. You can do it on a computer. It's not nearly as effective to do everything virtually. So you can do some virtually. You can have, some of your virtual people could be piped into a physical meeting by having a iPad, the camera on an iPad, kind of broadcasting the meeting. And we even had one interesting client recently had a remote person that was the only remote person, and so they actually, unbeknownst to us, they put together one of those cardboard cutouts, got the guy's picture, made a life-size cardboard cutout of the guy. They bought him a hat, and the cardboard cutout was at the board when they would do their meetings, and he was on the phone remotely and sometimes on webcam. So, you do what you do to make the team cohesive, but this is at the value stream level. And here's another board. This is a board that's in progress. That's a value stream board. That these are actually going to be only the number of KPIs they look at for the first 2 months. And then from these, they're going to track performance and then select the 5 that are going to become their dashboard. So this is a bit of a work in process here. And then here is a one team. This happens to be a manufacturing board. You can do this with engineering. You can do this with design projects. You can do it with healthcare. Patients being seen versus target versus actual. You can do it with any kind of financials, whether it's a healthcare claim, accounts payable, accounts receivable, whatever it could be. You're tracking what the output, the productivity should be versus what it actually is, and that's at a team level. So every single level of the organization needs to have a dashboard that answers the question, how are we doing? So that every leader can go into any area at any time and know more or less what's going on and what the obstacles are and how those problems are being solved. In a lean organization, there's also no guessing about abnormalities. We mentioned that a bit earlier. So, when you think about how you make physical items be more clear that they're abnormal, that's a little bit easier than the non-physical. But you can still have non-physical criteria that people are looking at so that and the clear criteria so that people can tell that something is not performing as it should. All leaders should be kind of not demanding, because you don't want a leader to demand, but need to be leading the organization toward everybody having strong visual management. And that philosophically is the way that keeps you from hiding from the facts. So all this is interconnected. You want fact-based decision making, then you've got to make problems visible, and you've got to have performance visible. In a lean organization, there's also no guessing about who, what, where, when, and how. So one of the things that we don't see anywhere near enough of in organizations are boards, work boards, that show who's doing what, who's assigned to which projects, when do they do, how are they doing. I mean, this can take all kinds of forms. But, in an engineering team, for example, it should be very, very clear who's working on what. And it can be a pop-up that comes onto the home page of an intranet if you've got a dispersed workforce, a distributed workforce. So it doesn't have to be physical, but where you have physical teams or the bulk of your teams are located, it helps tremendously to have a physical board that shows it. And then you can have people be able to write notes, and you can have problem solving right there, and it becomes a much more transparent and a great way to be able to look at how performance is really panning out. Now, with visual management, there's always, the rare problem that it becomes confusing. And so this is a real picture. It is not doctored. I kid you not. This is from Central California. We won't mention the city. And it is, kind of comical that they have this mixed message. And so one of the things that is very helpful is to have, again, the people that do the work learn what makes for a good visual and then decide what format it should look like that will make the most sense for them, and then vet that by the leadership team and make sure that works for them. I mean, there are a lot of customers to visual management. So anyone who is looking at a visual management board is a customer to that, and they need to be, considered when you're figuring out what is the right format. The other thing I'll mention is that we're working with a lot of teams now on visual management, and you need to be, teaching teams very much when do they use a bar chart, when do they use a line chart, what information do they include on a line chart, what date ranges do they include on a line chart. So, for example, last night we worked with a team, and they had a day by, it was week by week. They had a week by week, no, I'm sorry, it was day by day. They had a day by day chart, a line chart showing, performance. And we were pretty sure that they had made tremendous strides in the past 6 months, but you couldn't see it because it was only 2 weeks of performance, and it had been pretty stable for those 2 weeks. So we had them go back and add quarterly points for 2015 and monthly points for 2016, weekly points for, July, and then daily for August forward. And all of a sudden they were like, wow, look at how well we're doing. And it was beautiful because they could see this wonderful, in their case, they were trying to get the numbers down, this wonderful downward trend in how they were, little by little getting better and better at the level that they were trying to achieve. So it matters, and you've got to help people learn the right way to display the visuals. No, it's not San Luis Obispo, Chad. Someone just asked if that was San Luis Obispo. No, it's not. All right, so work standardization. So work standardization is another thing that when you get out of manufacturing, it's surprising how few organizations have really any standardization at all. They may think they do, and they may say they do, but when we start asking the tough questions, we find out they don't. So what do we mean by work standardization? What we mean is that every single process, and by the way, all work is a series of processes, every process is standardized. Now, for those creative areas, for those areas where there's the art of the work, where there's high variation in the work, there is a way to still standardize that it helps the organization move forward but allows for that variation to occur. And this nice visual depicts it. So you can have these milestones or these major milestones in a process where all the work is done a certain way. And you can even have minor milestones where the work is done a certain way. And then allow for all kinds of variation in between depending on the level of complexity, depending on the customer group, depending on the geography, depending on the product, depending on the day of the month. You know, whatever it might be, you can allow for that variation, but you still need to go to every single piece of work and get it standardized where it makes sense, where it's the right kind of standardization, not too much, not too little, just right, and that it's documented. So one of the things that we see, or people are really struggling, they may talk standard work, but they haven't documented it. And just think about it. New person comes on board, it's not documented, then you are relying on the game of gossip, and you are requiring people to take in mentally things that they could otherwise grasp far more quickly by seeing a visual that represents the work as well as being told what the work steps are. So, and then the other thing we do see is sometimes organizations go 180 the other direction. They document like crazy, but they're wickedly out of date. And so, again, if you're going to have standard work, you need to kind of manage the standard work and make sure it's current, because no process should be static. No process should be static. They're all dynamic, and the standard work needs to be updated accordingly. So when we say standard work, we don't mean the very wordy, all-word standard operating procedures of the past. We do mean that the process steps are visual and they're very easy to understand at the high level, especially step-by-step how-tos. It includes process maps, checklists, cheat sheets, memory joggers. It could be laminated cards. It could be physical cards. It could be solely online, although we still are seeing tremendous success with bringing some of the online processes into physical form and keeping them right where people work. Decision tree, so a lot of people say, oh, well, you can't standardize decisions. Yes, you can. So you can have if this, then that statements, and that help people, and that also helps push decisions lower in the organization, and flow charts. And so there's all kinds of ways to document how work should be done. Sometimes it's a matter of floor charts that show the flow of work. Sometimes it's modern day spaghetti diagrams. There's all kinds of things you can do, but it needs to be documented. And then the other thing is all work standards should be included within standard work. So just a quickie, that sounds a little confusing, especially if you're new to this. Work standards are the criteria. So you need to use 12-point font. The drawing needs to be plus or minus, the metal needs to be plus or minus 0.1 millimeters. The blood needs to be shaken for 2 minutes. The paint on the wall must be blue. Whatever the standard is, that's a work standard, the criteria to be able to say the work is good, that needs to be included in the standard work, which is the step-by-step for getting work done. And again, if you're a leader, you need to be, helping your teams understand why this is necessary and why relying on, tribal knowledge, especially there's a couple of industries that are really at risk right now. They're losing a lot of senior people. The ages of the workforce are getting toward retirement. Government and the oil and gas industry are two of the biggest, and energy, utilities too, are three of the biggest industries that are having problems with all of a sudden all this great brain power is leaving, and they're not leaving behind this legacy of decisions and knowledge and process steps and things like that for younger people to be able to follow in their footsteps. So it's a pretty big problem in some industries. So here's a very simple example of what the new kind of standard work looks like if you're writing the process steps, step 1, step 2, step 3. It's not all the little details, all the micro details, but there's a visual typically. And so the visuals will highlight some of the areas that are most likely to be missed or done wrong, and there's errors that develop. You want to highlight those areas or different things that have not worked well in the past, and only those things. You don't have to go into everything that's going right all the time. And then, most companies come up with some sort of a standard header and footer, and then they can do 2 columns, or in some cases, the pictures are not readable in 2 columns. They need to be full width, and these are usually stored in some sort of a shared drive or some kind of a storage mechanism. And these are the things that are looked at and updated on a regular basis. At the actual work site, the person doing the work might have an abbreviated version of this, might have just a laminated card with a checklist on it, might have whatever, or they could have an actual binder that has the pages of this in front of them if that's what, it just really depends on the work and the workplace. But standard work, if you're a leader, is just non-negotiable, and you have to help people understand how to write it well so that you are not held captive by not having standard work. Okay, so then the next thing is, if we look at go and see or Gemba management, so Gemba is a Japanese word that means where the work is done or where the action occurs. And what we have seen little movement in, a little bit, but not a lot, is leaders, getting out of their offices and starting to go to the Gemba on a very regular basis. This is very different for those of you who are a little bit older on the webinar. This is very different from managing by walking around, MBOW, or MBWA. This is very different. It's very intentional, purposeful. There are usually some, if the leader standard work has been put in place, there are usually some key points that you're hoping to achieve when you go to the Gemba, and I'd like to share with you some of those right now. So first of all, there's a way to go to the Gemba. Regardless of the reason, there's a way that you approach it. One is to remember that you're going to go and see, you're going to ask why, and in all cases show respect. And so this is where the workforce and leadership start bonding in a very powerful way. And a lot of leaders are sometimes in the beginning, they'll say to us, well, we don't want them to get really comfortable with us. And we'll say, well, we're not asking you guys to go out for drinks every night, or have each other over for dinner and those types of things, but we are asking that, don't you want information about what's going on and what the progress is and where the problems are? Well, yes. Well, the only way to do that is to, become a little more accessible and friendly and, trustworthy for the front lines to be able to share those things. So when you go to the work site, there's basically 3 different ways we view how Gemba walks occur and why they occur. So the first one is with daily management. So daily management is going to the work area if you're a supervisor, maybe a couple of areas within the division if you happen to be a vice president, and if you're an executive, you are probably going to that same physical area that a vice president would be going to. And that's to look at the KPIs and hear what the progress is, hear what the problems are, and make sure the teams are moving forward on solving the gaps that exist. So it's modeling the behavior, asking questions. The actual problem solving occurs offline, and coaching occurs offline. It's really a matter of just learning what's going on and seeing whether or not progress is being made. And then you have to figure out, if not, why not, and what to do about it. So that's regular daily management, and weekly for kind of a director level, monthly for executive level, C-level. Then there's getting out of your office the minute there's a problem. So, for those of you who are highly skilled with Lean, you've probably already adopted the habit that we've got where, we'll be sitting in a conference room and someone will say something and we'll say, well, let's go and see. And people will be like, well, we're in the middle of the meeting. I'm like, yeah, let's go see. That's part of our meeting. Let's go see. And in some cases, let's call them up. Let's get them on the phone. And people will say, now? Yes, get them on the phone now. We're going to bring the Gemba to us. And so, you want to make sure you get the people in the know engaged as early in the problem solving as possible when there's a problem to be solved. Now, this type of Gemba walk and going to the Gemba is reactive. There's a problem, you need to solve it, so it's very reactive. The other kind of Gemba walk, so this daily management one is a little proactive, and it's also just part of the regular cadence of managing. This one is reactive. The last one is going on a regular basis for no particular reason other than to find out what people are working on, what they're doing, if they're staying true to the priorities, if they're deviating from priorities, and getting a lot of information as a leader that helps you make better decisions and helps you understand what development needs are needed in the people. So, when the first time that leaders go out there, they'll usually come back with, oh my gosh, I had no idea, and then there's all these things that you want to attend to as a leader. So it could be, for example, that the leader thought it was clearly communicated what the organization's priorities were, and then you go into a work area and say 2 or 3 key resources working on something that is extremely low priority, and they haven't even started to work on something that's high priority. So that's, a nice revealing piece of information you need to take action on. Sometimes it's a matter of people being stuck and they haven't been able to get good help in getting them unstuck. There's some sort of obstacle in the way, and a senior leader can remove obstacles better than anyone in the organization. So sometimes you discover those kinds of things. Sometimes you get the opposite kind of thing where you go, wow, they really do understand what our problems are. They really do understand how to solve them. They actually even understand how to set policy when they're given the full picture. And it's just all kinds of wonderful discoveries that happen when you regularly go physically to the workplace. And leaders are obligated to clear their schedules to allow this to happen. And if it means flying all over the country or the globe, it means flying all over the country or the globe. It is key to being a good lean leader. Now, I'm not going to go into this so much. This slide is very wordy, and so I'm providing it there for you because we put it together quite a while ago for a particular client, and we've tweaked it a little bit, but I'm sharing it with you. Leader standard work, LSW, is what we call the daily management that people need to do. And you'll see that there are 3 different levels of leadership with, what's the purpose of it, how often do they do it, who goes, what's the standard agenda, and what do they do after they're out at the Gemba. So you can take a look at that at your leisure. And here's an actual Gemba walk in progress. This happens to be a vice president in an area, and he's asking some follow-up questions to the team to assess, their understanding of the problem and whether or not they're stuck at all or whether they're making good progress. I'd like to point out these walks, these Gemba meetings or daily huddles, they're sometimes referred to, should be no more than 15 minutes. And if you see up here, it's kind of hard to see, but there's green, yellow, red on this clock. So the green is the 10 minutes for the meeting, and they keep their eye on the clock, and they must be early on this day. And then the yellow is, when they're getting into danger and they're going along, and then the red is they just pull the plug. So there are lots of different ways. One of my favorite ways to end these meetings or keep track of them is at Menlo Innovations in Ann Arbor, Michigan, has a dartboard, and the dartboard signals a crazy sound when it's time for the meeting to start and when it's time for the meeting to stop. It's really fun. So you can have some fun with it as well. The other thing that you can do, if you're in a large campus kind of environment or a very, very large building, if you're a large company, and even if you're global, you can have a standard work document that shows the routing that the leaders are going to take at different levels to do their Gemba walks. And again, this is more the KPI style Gemba walk where you're regularly including this as leader standard work. Again, depending on the level you're at, this could be daily, weekly, or monthly. Or, monthly is the least frequent we'd recommend. And only at the highest levels would go that infrequently. And you can have, all these different formats that show we go to this station, this station, this station. So these things become scheduled like a ballet. It's 10 minutes here, then we have 5-minute walk time, and 10 minutes here, and we have a 7-minute walk time, and 10 minutes here, and we've got a 15-minute walk time. So you schedule it so that you're very respectful of the leader's time, and they're taking the least amount of time to get the most information as possible. The other thing that I wanted to mention on these Gemba walks, until you start doing them on a regular basis, it's hard to really understand the power of them. But there's a lot of misunderstandings that get surfaced and corrected while you're out there talking with the workforce. You'll notice a lot of new needs that come up. There's also a great way to make sure that the organization vision is being reinforced. So when I was at my very first big corporate job, it was HealthNet in Woodland Hills, California. The then CEO, who's now chairman of the board, Roger Greaves, would be very effective in doing what then was called management by walking around, but he was actually doing Gemba walks. He just didn't know it then because they were very intentional. They had an agenda, and he carried around a little plastic card that showed the top 3 priorities for the company. And as he was talking with a worker all the way to the front lines, all the way to the newest, most junior person in the company, he'd say, hey, I'm just curious, are you familiar with what our top 3 priorities are this year? And then if they didn't know, he'd pull it out and show it to them. Very, very kind, no finger pointing, no blame. And then he'd say, so let's think about what you do, how does that help us achieve these goals? And he would just be constantly helping that organizational alignment as he'd go around. It'd take him a whole month to get across the whole organization, but every day or every couple days, he'd be going around and visiting a different work area. It was very effective from his perspective, and it was very effective as a junior employee to be able to talk with the CEO like that. No humility, lots of curiosity, and tons of respect. All right, so here's your action plan. Then we're going to go to questions because there are lots of them coming in. So your action plan, if you're a leader on the call, and if you're an internal improvement person, your job is to talk with your leaders about this. Go to your teams who you currently have leverage over and have them develop 2 to 5 KPIs, no more than 5 for a dashboard. What are the key measures that show the degree of success they're having as a team? And determine what the targets are. Even if you're mid-cycle, with the fiscal year, it doesn't matter. Just do it. Just get 2 to 5 KPIs going so that people know how to keep score, what their score is. Remove fear from the equation. Number 2 here. Just approach all of this very matter-of-fact, non-emotional. It doesn't matter in some ways how you got somewhere other than wanting to not repeat that, but it doesn't really matter the series of events and the people who did what. It matters where you're at and where you want to go. And so this is the way to keep these kinds of discussions non-emotional. Next, institute regular Gemba walks or daily huddles, daily stand-ups, short walks in every single area you oversee. If you're internal, I recommend highly that you don't roll this out all at once and that you don't roll out visual management all at once. You need to do it in a demonstration area or 2. Let them work out the bugs. Every culture is a little different. It takes a while to get these working really smooth. And then once you have a good example, you have a best practice going, then you can modify that as needed for the rest of the organization and roll it out in phases. But we see far too much of organizations having a mandate. Okay, everybody has to put a visual board up and blah, 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 and it just never works. I've never seen it successful. So don't do that. And then the next thing is and this takes time, this takes a lot of time, but it's time that you have to spend having your teams create written standard work. Again, highly visual, just the facts, ma'am, no long, wordy, all-word statements and documents, no 4-inch 3-ring binders anymore, just the facts that somebody that's a new hire would need to learn how to do a reasonably good job doing the work. Get that down and standardize it and error-proof it while you're at it. Those 4 things will get you miles ahead of where you are right now. Okay, so now if you want to learn more, it was really hard to give you only a few books because there are so many wonderful books out there. So I selected these books for different reasons. if you only read one, read The Toyota Way to Lean Leadership. That is the book. If you only read one historical, I'd read Out of the Crisis over The Effective Executive, but The Effective Executive is more engaging than Out of the Crisis, and it's thinner. So if you want to read a historical book that's really good about leadership, that's very lean thinking already in it, do that. These two books are newer on the lean front about leadership and what it takes to be a good lean leader. And then mine I put here because I'd be a bad author if I didn't mention my book. So my publisher would kill me. So there I also invite you to take a look at that. 3 conferences that are the best in the industry. Association for Manufacturing Excellence is not done yet for this year. The other 2 are. And it's in Dallas in October. Fantastic conference. And I am going to be keynoting this year. So I'd love to see you in Dallas. And then tours, especially outside your industry, you want to look at what people are doing elsewhere and then figure out how to bring it in. It will, or if to bring it in and how to adapt it, it will get you a lot further than trying to copy what your competitors are doing, because your competitors have a unique environment and you can't copy. And then finally, you just have to practice, and more practice. You get better and better and better at this as time goes on. So those are some tips I had for learning more. And then we have number 2 webinar is going to be Thursday, September 22nd, again at 11 o'clock Pacific Daylight Time. And we're going to talk about strategy deployment and PDSA problem solving from a leadership perspective. So this isn't going to be, teaching all of the details of problem solving. This is going to be, how you should help leaders learn how to problem solve, how to take them through that process versus the long, involved technical webinar about problem solving. There's plenty of those already on our website, ksmartin.com/webinar. You can go back and look at some of those. All right, so now let's go to questions or comments. And what I'd like to do is take one of the 2 that was offered during registration and then go to your questions. And then if we have time, I'll go to the second of the 2. So the first question is, what can lower level leaders within the organization do to help drive senior staff to take a more proactive approach to lean leadership? I'm hoping the webinar provided enough ideas for that. But the one thing that I didn't really talk about that I wanted to mention here is that it really starts with a conversation. It starts with a conversation about where you're at as an organization and where you want to go when it comes to operational excellence, improvement, establishing a continuous improvement culture, whatever you want to call it. It starts with a conversation of what does that look like? How does that feel? What's it sound like when you walk into a work environment with that environment? Define that true north that you're heading toward from an organizational perspective. Like what's it look and feel like? Now, where are you now? What's it look and feel like now? How do people behave? How do they think? And then you have yourself a gap, and you probably have multiple gaps. And then you have to do good problem solving to look at, well, what are the root causes for them and what do we need to do about it? So I think the first thing is to sit down with senior leadership, ask for the meeting, express your concerns about where you're at and get excited about where you can help lead the organization, and then everything's going to be situational from that point, and that will be very helpful. Okay, so now I'm going to bring my questions back out and take some questions that you're asking, and then we'll go back to these questions. All right, so, lots of questions. Okay, I'm going to go all the way up to the top. Can you expound on daily Kaizen was one question. So there's a lot to it. It's basically making continuous improvement on a daily basis, and it involves the people who do the work identifying the need for it and then being authorized to actually create the improvements. So leaders' job in daily Kaizen is to set any sort of boundaries or limitations that the workforce has to operate within, and then let them loose. So for example, if there's a policy that you don't want the front lines to be able to challenge, or if there's some kind of a physical constraint or a technology constraint, then you can set that and then let the team go wild. I mean, this is where they unleash their creativity, and that's something that needs to be happening on a daily basis. All too often, leaders get in the way. And they either don't authorize the workers to do anything unless they get permission, or they actually, if it's not their idea, they don't like it. And that's, both of those are a way to destroy continuous improvement at the get-go. So that's a little bit about daily Kaizen. I would recommend, let's see, actually, no matter what industry you're in, I recommend that you read Mark Graban's book about daily Kaizen in healthcare, because everything he talks about applies everywhere. So it's Mark Graban, Graban, and his daily Kaizen book. And then the other one, if you want to go back and read kind of the master, is Kaizen by, I want to say Amayo. I think it's Amayo. I'll look it up on my phone while we're talking. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next question, but let me, Kaizen book, let's see, get the author's name for you guys. Oh, Amai. So it's Masaki Amai. I, M as in Michael, A-I, Masaki, M-A-S as in Sue, A-A-K-I. Kaizen, the key to Japan's competitive success, also a phenomenal book. Okay, so I already did the book's recommendations, so hopefully that answered your question, Brenda. Yes, the webinars are available to listen later. They are available on our website, ksmartin.com/webinars. They're also available on YouTube, Vimeo, and SlideShare, and the materials will also be on SlideShare. Okay, so slide 19, your animation doesn't make for a very good printed version. Yeah, I did that. I thank you, Matthew, but I did that intentionally because I wanted the first slide, the first thing to go completely away and all that. So thank you. Okay. Should the documentation be scheduled during the Kaizen event? In my experience, this gets missed and is left as a newspaper item. Thoughts about effectiveness? So, okay, let's talk about what a Kaizen event is. So a real Kaizen event, you actually make improvement by the end of the Kaizen event. It's implemented and work is now occurring the new way, which means it has to be documented in the Kaizen event. So if it's going on a newspaper item or a 30-day list, then that would be what I call a rapid planning event, not a Kaizen event. So yes, if you're doing a real Kaizen event, standard work gets documented in the event, it's trained within the event, it's rolled out within the event, and people are doing work the new way at the end of the event. So that's my view of that. What is the difference between process maps and flowcharts? I view process maps as being the linear, often swim lane style process level maps that show the handoffs and the steps, step 1, step 2, with no decision trees in it. Flowcharts have decision trees. So flowcharts are very, very effective for teaching people how to think, what kinds of decisions to make, and what the flow of the work is. They are not very effective in being able to use that as a foundation for making improvement because they don't typically have metrics associated with them. Process maps often do and can. We have a method we use called metrics-based process mapping. We've got a book. It has an accompanying Excel tool for documenting processes, and that's my view of the difference. Okay, next question. How do organizations manage keeping a standard work updated, i.e. obtaining revisions from the staff and then pushing back out to the organization? Good question. So there is typically a process owner, and most organizations currently do not have effective process owners in place. They are responsible for minding the store, and they operate cross-functionally. This is why most organizations don't have one. So a process owner is someone who's designated, and everyone understands that they are designated as a person watching the process no matter which functional area it's in. And they have the authority not to change the process on their own, but to pull together a cross-functional team to revisit the process, make improvements, redocument it, and then roll it back out to all the people who are doing the work. And they are also obligated to include upstream suppliers to that part of the process and downstream customers to that part of the process. So it's a matter of creating a table of all the processes and designating who the owner is. And if someone resigns or leaves for any other reason, there needs to be a new process owner as part of the offboarding process when someone is leaving, so that there's a new replacement in place to manage those processes. And there's a whole lot that you can there's a webinar I had called, I don't know, something about process ownership. I can't really leave my slide right now because, oh wait, I know what I can do. Hang on. I'm going to get my webinar up on another screen, and then I'll tell you what the name of it is. And I'm going to go ahead and move on, as this is, wait, hang on, webinars. Okay, next question is missing part of daily management for 3 levels, not start from supervisor, but start from people who work there. What do you think? Well, so yeah, I mean, you do start with the people who work there in terms of the key performance indicators being decided, but it's the supervisors that are walking to the area and the workforce is presenting where they're at and how they're solving problems and that type of thing. So it's the workforce runs the meetings. They oftentimes will have a rotating lead, but it's the Gemba walk is typically, you know, management coming in, whether supervisor, team lead, or whatever, to, you know, just take a look at performance and have conversations about how they're doing and that type of thing. So yes and no, you start at the daily level. Okay, I'm going to go back now to this slide and go to question number 2. So question number 2, how do you recommend navigating leadership changes, turnovers, etc., when the current leader supports it but is leaving? Next leader may not embrace the initiative. So here's the first thing about that is this is a problem when lean is being viewed as a, quote, program or a, quote, initiative. Lean needs to be viewed in the organization as a new way of operating. It's a new way of breathing. It's a new way of navigating daily life there. It's a new way of operating and thinking. So if you can get that new way in place and into the DNA of the organization before a new leader takes over, unless that leader operates antithetically to what lean leadership is, then it has a reasonable chance of sticking. Now, that said, I will share, and it's really sad to see, I've seen several very top lean organizations that have won Shingo prizes and have been at the top of the game get new leadership, and the new leadership that came in was not respectful, didn't have curiosity, wasn't humble, didn't give a hoot about KPIs, and it quickly falls apart. So, it's if you get good leadership, and you have built it into the DNA, it has a very, very high likelihood of sticking, because it's, there's nothing about lean management that is, negative. I mean, it's like, it's the right way to operate a business. It's the only way to operate a business. So there's nothing about it that people would say, overtly, well, I don't think we should be respectful. I don't think we should have curiosity. So it's kind of like, why would you not? But it is true that unless you get it to be the way you operate, and if to the extent that it's viewed as a program or initiative, it is at high risk, very high risk of going away. So that's some helpful, hopefully, things there. Okay, back to questions. We have time for one more. Let's see. Can you briefly answer question 2 on slide 46? Oh, I did. Okay. All right. Next question. From a lean support role, what would you say to a leader who doesn't have time to go to the Gemba? I would say you don't have time to not go to the Gemba, because going to the Gemba will save so much time in the end that they are obligated to find time to go to the Gemba. To stick in an office and, stick with meetings and that type of thing and not get to where the actual value is being created and provided is not good leadership. I mean, I wouldn't say that to their face, but just I'm saying to you, that's just not good leadership. So if they don't have time, one question I might ask is, well, I'm provocative, and so I actually always say to leaders who say that, because I do hear this a lot, you don't have time to not go. So then I'll say, let's talk about why you don't have time. Let's talk about how to create some time. What are some of the things that you're doing that bug you that you wish you didn't have to do? And people love to, talk about things that annoy them and things that, and usually those things that annoy them are good candidates for getting them off their plate. And then you can have them regularly schedule infrequent but regular Gemba visits, and then keep working with them to remove some more things off their plate. Maybe they're not a great delegator and they need a little bit of help with learning how to delegate better and that type of thing. So there's almost always a good way to get a leader to find the time to go to Gemba. And you know, you have to make sure it's not an excuse for being afraid. Here's another thing that I would recommend to all of you who are internal improvement people or consultants. You often need to help script your leaders the first time they go out. And I don't mean they stand there with a piece of paper and read off of it, but you get them comfortable with the kinds of questions that they should be asking and would be helpful to build that relationship between the front lines, middle managers, and leaders, senior leaders, and get them comfortable with what they're going to do out there. If leaders have been in their offices for years and years on end, it is intimidating for them to go out. They are afraid that people are going to ask them questions they can't answer and they're going to look stupid. And you have to help them, you know, kind of work through that and prepare them as much as possible so that the likelihood of that is lower. But it does sometimes happen that someone will ask a question or say something and the leader's just kind of like, you know, and then I'm usually with them for the beginning and I'll kind of, you know, step in and answer a little bit just to help the leader get off the hook. And then we usually go back and do a reflection after the first few Gembas on what worked well, what could be done differently, and you get better and better at going to the Gemba the more you do it. So I hope that helps a little bit. All right, you guys, I see that it is now 12:16. We're a minute late Pacific time, so I want to thank you all so much for your time and attention. Again, please let everyone know that these webinars are all over the place. If other people want to watch them afterwards, remember the next one is September 22nd, which is a Thursday, and you can register on our website. I'll send out some announcements via our subscription list. So that is one thing last thing I'd like to leave you with is that we have a subscription list that gives you access to a bunch of free resources. And I don't really send a whole lot out. I mean, maybe once a month. It's been months and months this year that I haven't sent anything at all. So I'm not going to bug you, but it will give you access to our library of free resources, templates, assessments, etc. And I do like to share technical information from time to time about how to be more effective making improvement and moving an organization into excellence. So with that, thank you all. Thank you. Have a great rest of the day or evening or night, wherever you are, and look forward to seeing you again. Thank you. Bye-bye.